Hi folks, this video is going to be a little bit different to my normal videos. It's not about hiking gear to start with. It's from my other sport or work, which is scuba diving. So I've had a few questions recently about side mount regulators and how they're configured, the best choice of regulator, things like that. So I thought I'd just go through and do a quick video. And just in case you're wondering, I've been diving for about 30 plus years. I'm a commercial diver, I'm a side mount diver. I used to work in the dive industry for a decade. So yeah, I've had a fair bit of experience, and I'm a bit of a gear nerd as well, as I'm sure you can tell from my other videos on hiking gear. But hopefully this will be of interest. First thing I wanted to say, the reason I'm lying down on the floor here is because obviously when I'm side mount diving, I have my tanks at either side of me, not in this exact position, but a similar position, a little bit lower down. And I thought it was important to show you this because there's an important thing when you're choosing first stages, which is what I'll focus on for side mount, and that is the routing of the hoses. Okay, now a couple of things to notice here. Like most divers, I'll have an inflator hose at the front, okay, connected to my inflator. Okay, so that will be here. That's this hose which I've got here. So one of the things to consider is that you want to optimally route all of the hoses. Okay, so this inflator hose, if it's coming across like this, that's in an optimal position. Okay, so it's coming across to your chest. I've also got this regulator. Okay, regulator hose running behind my head. This is actually my backup. I would also have my primary reg coming from the other side. Okay, so the routing of those is particularly important too. You can see that this one, it's connected to a port so that it runs up and around my neck. So it's in a good position, okay? It's not being bent at odd angles or anything like that. I've also got these high pressure hoses with gauges on that I can check as I'm diving, okay? Really important to monitor your gear, to monitor your air, I should say, or your gas supply. And you need to be able to do it for both tanks, okay? Quite easily. Okay? So those are a few key things, and they will affect your choice of first stage in particular. Okay, so I'll show you what I'm using here, and I'll show you how it compares to what you might do with a back mount system. Okay, and hopefully that'll help you understand why I've chosen the first stages that I have and why I've got them set up the way I have. Now, obviously, if you're planning on doing side mount diving, do a proper course with a proper instructor. That's how I learned to do all this. I did side mount courses, I did my cave training, side mount, okay, through to full cave. So, you know, you want to be getting some training rather than just sort of listening to some guy on the internet. But hopefully this will give you a bit of an idea if you're considering purchasing regulators to use for side mount, some of the important considerations. And even if you back mount, hopefully some of the things I mentioned might be helpful as well. So let's go. Okay, so you can see some of my gear laid out here. My tanks that I use for side mount. I haven't got my side mount BCD or anything like that here with me. I didn't think it was really necessary to show you that because the main focus here is just the first stages. Then we've got, well, parts anyway of one of my old back mount systems. The wing's actually sitting over there, but unfortunately it's got so much use, it's so tatty now. I think the material's actually shrunk. Between them, I think these two BCDs have probably done thousands of dives, so I'm sort of, they're not in the best condition, but I just wanted to set this single tank setup in a way that would be similar to what most people might use, so I can highlight the differences with side mount. And the other thing I've got here is a commercial diving setup. Okay, so from when I did my commercial diving course, and really that's not going to be relevant to anybody, but or many people. But one of the reasons I wanted to show you this was because the way the first stage is set up, is similar to what you would do for a twin set. So when I was using twin tanks, I had a similar setup to that in terms of the first stages at least. Okay, one thing you might notice when you look at my side mount tanks, these are quite small tanks. I like using small tanks. Between them I've got about 14 litres, so more than a regular single cylinder. Okay, plus I've got the redundancy and everything there, and improved balance and so forth. And I can lift it, so it's not destroying my back. Okay, so a couple of key things. First off, you can see that all of my hoses, okay, are set up in a very streamlined way. They're running down the tank. Maybe not so much for this one, but you know, when this is stored on a boat, I've got a bungee that goes around here that sort of keeps that quite neat. Okay, so that's one important thing, is to make sure everything's neat. But also, you want things to be neat because when you're diving with the gear, you want it to sit close to your body. So this side of the cylinder, this is the side that sits next to me, okay, up against me. That means that all the hoses are protected. Okay, they're up against me, they're protected, and that's the way we want it to be. We don't want things dangling down the bottom or anything like that. That's one thing. The other thing is, as I mentioned before, you want the hoses to route appropriately. So you want your high pressure hose running down the cylinder like this, so it's nice and neat out the way. It's not sticking out here like this. Some people used to dive the side mount that way with the hose sticking out here, which is going to get caught on things and just be in the way. You want it nice and streamlined. And any hoses that are going to be kept out of the way, like this long hose, for example, some of this is deployed, but it's wrapped around the back of your neck. So some of it's still going to be on the tank. So that's another reason you want this hose sort of running straight down like this. Okay, so it's sort of so that it's not sticking out again at odd angles. It's nice and streamlined. However, you want your inflator hose to be coming out in a direction that'll take it to your inflator, okay, so across the chest, as I mentioned before. So we want this actually coming out sideways, so a different direction to the other low pressure port here and the high pressure port, okay. Now you could, I suppose, have the inflator going down here and then maybe coming back up and round, but you're sort of taking it on odd angles there, and it's not very efficient either. You're sort of using a lot more hose than you actually need to. I think that's really important, so that it's not being bent at odd angles or getting caught around things. Now, if I have a dry suit, I actually have another inflator that comes out here, so about the same length. So one goes to my BCD and the other goes to my dry suit. So those are the key things. So the choice of regulator, or first stage at least, the second stage isn't quite so important. I think this swivel style of regulator gives you the optimum routing, okay? So if you mount it sideways like that, okay, you can have your high pressure port coming down here, that's great. You can have your low pressure ports, okay, for your regulators going down like this. When this is in use, this one here, it pulls up like that, okay, and sits around the back of your shoulder and into your mouth, okay. So again, the routing is nice and clean, okay. The hose isn't being bent around at odd angles that put stress on it or anything like that, okay. It's nice and clean, and when you pack it away at the end of the dive, maybe to pass it up to somebody on the boat to be stored, you can put it away nice and neatly. And again, I'd have a bungee around here just to keep that secure. Okay, this port here for the inflator is actually an add-on. So these first stages, these are called UST first stages. They're Apex, okay. And at least when I got these, this was an add-on. It might have changed now, but they're easy to do, easy to buy and easy to install. Okay, so that's what I'm using for side mount. Now, how does that compare to your typical first stages with a back mount system? Okay, so this one here is basically the same regulator as that, except it doesn't have the turret. Okay, so this is what they call a US4, okay, which is unsealed first stage with 4 low pressure ports. For back mount diving, that's perfectly fine, okay, because if you think about it, if these are your shoulders here like that, okay, on either side, yep, the hoses are basically just running around either under your shoulder or just over your shoulder, okay. So having the hoses coming out the side like that is perfectly fine. But if you took this regulator and stuck it into a side mount setup, you're going to have a few issues. So you've got a high pressure hose there, you've got a couple of low pressure ports. One of them could be for your regulator, okay, and one could be for your inflator. However, the hoses are not going to be optimally routed because they're going to be going down, okay. You're not going to have them sticking out like this. You don't want that. So they're going to have to do kinks. You know, this will have to sort of kink round, and this one will have to kink round, and it's going to push against you. It's not going to sit very nicely, and it's also going to put some strain on the hose. So that works perfectly fine for back mount, but not so good for side mount. Now the swivel probably adds some extra O-rings to the whole thing, so it's not quite as simple as that style of first stage. But you know, that's the compromise that you make, and I've never really had any issues with the extra O-rings failing or anything like that, so I don't think it's really that much of an issue. Now the only thing I was going to show you on this this commercial diving setup, it's quite different to what most people would use for recreational diving, but it does have one interesting feature, and this is similar to what you would have with a twin set. So this particular first stage, which again is by Apex, doesn't really matter, the brand's not important, but it has all of its ports on the one side, okay? So both of these are the same, they're just, you know, for different tanks, okay? Which means that all the hoses are routed down like this. But you have the same problem if you tried to use this for side mount, okay? Even though you've got more ports to play with, which might be useful, and more positions to put the hoses in, you're still going to have the same issue of all the hoses running down and having to sort of twist around to either go to the inflator or up to your second stage, okay? So hopefully you can see the issue there and why I think these swivel ports, and it doesn't matter what brand they are, again this is Apex, they're USTs, there are DSTs which just have a dry seal on there, okay? It doesn't really matter for unless you're in really cold water, but these are the ones that I use, but you know, you can get similar sorts of regulators from SCUBA Pro, or first stages from SCUBA Pro and other brands. I just wanted to mention something on this particular tank. Normally when you're diving with this tank, some of the hose is actually deployed, okay? So you have this sort of in your mouth as you're diving. It's a bit hard to show while I've got the tank off, but you've got part of the hose there. Now, if you had to share air, there's already some length here that you can share, okay? But if you are traveling, say you're inside a wreck, for example, or inside a cave, and you had to exit while sharing air, you would want to deploy all of this hose, okay? And you'd want to do that in open water as well. I mean, I've had situations where I've shared air with people, not that they're out of air, but just to stretch the air a little bit further to get them back where I wanted to bring them up. If conditions are a little bit marginal where we'd otherwise surface, you want to give them as much hose as possible. So this is a 7-foot hose, so you can actually deploy this entire hose during a dive. And I just want to show you something. If I had one of these standard first stages which don't have a swivel on them, okay, or a turret, the hoses can't move, okay? They're stuck in position. If you could imagine on here, if this was a first stage with a fixed port pointing that way, when I shed air, this hose is going to bend round at a really nasty angle, and that's got to put a lot of pressure on this connection here, and also it'll get in the way quite a bit, you know, form a bit of a lump there. So you really don't want that. So when you deploy this hose, you want that to swivel around like that, okay? Particularly if you've got, you know, for example, in a cave, the person who's receiving air would be in front, so you want as much hose length as possible extending out in front there, and yeah, of course, you don't want that that bend in the hose. So having that swivel in there is really useful. That's a really good feature. So yeah, that's my 2 cents worth. I suppose the only other thing I'll mention, you might have noticed, okay, all of my first stages are DIN, okay? Now, I don't know why anyone would want to use yoke, to be honest. I think a lot of the shops use it because it's quick and easy to take, you know, to unscrew and take off, to swap tanks and do things like that. But really, to my mind, that's just surface logic. You know, what's important is what works underwater and what maximizes your safety. So for me, DIN is the way to go. It properly traps the O-ring inside there. You know, I've seen plenty of yoke first stages. The O-rings pop out, you know, and cause all sorts of havoc on the surface and occasionally underwater. So DIN is absolutely the way to go, but for side mount it's particularly so. I mean, because you don't want like this, a knob hanging down the bottom here, okay? You want this to be smooth. I mean, remember, that's the bottom of the diver, okay, where you're swimming along the reef. You don't want, you know, bits of line getting caught in this, fishing line and stuff like that. You want it to be as streamlined as possible, and also as solid as possible. So that's really solid, you know, that DIN fitting. You know, it's going to take impacts. I mean, that's why I use it on the others, particularly like the commercial setup, you know, and again, that's also why with the commercial setup and with the side mount setup, which I've used for cave and wreck diving, I don't want hoses sticking out the side, okay? I don't want this sort of thing, okay? Because those hoses are in line for hitting things, whether it's a sharp piece of wreck or whether it's a rock or whatever, okay? I don't want those hoses being sheared off and wrecking my dive, okay? Or even on a boat, okay? You don't want to miss out on going for a dive because, you know, a hose has been broken or cut or something like that. So try and keep the hoses nice and streamlined and out of the way. And yeah, use DIN, don't use yoke. Okay, well, I think that's all for this one. Try and keep it short. I don't know whether I'll do more of these. I mean, I used to do a lot of dive equipment type, not videos, this was pre-YouTube, but I used to do a lot of, I put together a website and, you know, a lot of online stuff. And because I'm the diving officer and, you know, I've worked in the dive industry and a bit of a gearhead, people tend to ask me a lot of questions about dive equipment. So if I feel motivated, I might make some more videos like this one. But I thought, since people had asked, it wouldn't be a bad idea just to put something up about the first stages to start with. Okay, hope you enjoyed this. All the best.